We're going to talk today about inversions and how and when we use them. Inversions are, of course, when we switch the subject and the verb around in a non-traditional sentence structure. So we're going to talk about that today. Now, if you have any questions throughout the video, you're welcome to ask them by pressing the round button at the bottom. There's a question button. You can write your question and I'll answer those at the very end. And today we're going to talk about inversions, how and when to use them. So let's get started. So the outline for today, I'm going to define what it is, what an inversion is. If you don't know it, then I'm going to talk about why we use them. And then I'll look at 5 sort of main uses of inversions. The most popular, of course, and the most common is the question. We invert the order in a question, but we also do it in other ways. And so we're going to talk about those and see which ones you're using in English and challenge you perhaps to use others. All right, so let's look at the definition. What is an inversion? I think most of us know perhaps what an inversion is, but it's when the subject and the verb switch their traditional order of appearance so that the subject follows or comes after, is second to the verb. So here's an example. Here's a traditional sentence structure. A lamp stood beside the bed. And then if we reverse it, we have beside the bed stood a lamp. So we have the verb first, then the subject. And so we're going to look at these types of sentences and understand why we use them and when it perhaps is appropriate. In fact, we're going to look at that right now. Why use inversions? And apologize for the small glitch there in the font. We do it for sentence variety when we want to sort of mix up or change our sentence structure. So this is a good sort of effect in that way, inversions, and also for emphasis. So if you look below, here's an inversion. Along the path came a strange man. And so when we invert it, then sort of the emphasis falls on the strange man. Although this is sort of a traditional understanding of why we use it. I'm not convinced if I say a strange man came along the path that it's any less emphasized. So, but that's another debate for another time. But in theory, it's meant to provide emphasis on something that you'd like to highlight. Now let's look at the most important or most common feature of inversions, and that's with the question. So we have a statement here, I like ice cream. And when we convert this to a question, you can see the inversion. Do you like? Verb, and then the subject, do, and then you. Do you like ice cream? We have another example here. I asked the teacher a question. What did you say to the teacher? So here we have this inversion. So questions I think most of us are familiar with. If we're at pre-intermediate or higher, this is not a problem. But I think less common, less discussed, and obviously less used are these other forms. So let's look at them. And we start with negative expressions or negative adverbs with never, seldom, and rarely, though there are others as well, which I'll mention. Never had she seen such a beautiful sight before. So when we use never in that context, we invert the order. Never had she seen. Never have I been. Seldom, this is rarely, seldom do we see such an amazing display of dance. Rarely will you hear such beautiful music. Now you can also use the words scarcely and hardly. These are other words, these sort of adverbs, these negative adverbs as they're sometimes referred to, that we can understand them. Now let's look at a few others here. And we will now go to restrictive expressions and they will be found here. But before we do that, we have a key grammar point. Now, we can only use these negative expressions that we just talked about, never, seldom, rarely. We can only use these if the adverb is modifying the whole phrase and not the noun. If it modifies the noun, hardly anyone means almost no one. Hardly anyone knew. If it's modifying a noun, then the sentence order is the same. So it has to sort of modify the whole sentence, then we can reverse the order. That will take practice. I didn't prepare any practice for that sort of moment, but that is one that will need practice. Distinguishing when it modifies a noun and when it modifies the whole sentence. So if we go back just for a second, I'll try to help you with that because it is an important distinction. If you look here, so we had seldom anyone, so seldom belongs to anyone. Here we don't say never she. It's not, never is not modifying the noun. Seldom is not modifying we, and rarely is not modifying you or describing you. It's describing, all of these are describing sort of the whole sense of this sentence. That's why we can reverse the order. And I think some of you will need to practice that. Now let's look at some restrictive clauses, which I think are, I would say, advanced. I don't hear a lot of non-native speakers using these, but I think they're very interesting to use, and I think you should try to use them. Only, later, nowhere, little, only, and in no way. Now, only has a lot, actually, only in this way, which I don't think is that common. I should not have included it. But let's take a look. Only later did she really think about the situation. Nowhere have I ever had such bad service. This third one is very common and one you probably want to know. Little did he know, little did she know. Very, very common expression now. Little did she know, little did he know. This is a very common expression. I can say rather common. Only in this way could John earn enough money. So only at the beginning of the sentence, when it prefigures something restrictive, a restrictive adverbial clause, this actually can give us a clue as to when an inversion takes place. In no way do I agree. So you see there the inversion. That means I don't agree at all. All right. These are different ways you can try. So what I would try to do, sort of a practical approach here, is I would, if I were you, take two of these and try to use them in your conversation. Some of you have speaking partners. Some of you have group chats. Some of you have friends you talk in English to. You take two of these. I would suggest little did she know or little did he know, because this is a very common one. And maybe only later, only is used quite a bit in this sense, so you can do it. And we're going to actually look at a few more in the next slide. So take a look at, these are actually more common, I think, in the next slides. Let's take a look. Not until, not since, only after, only when, only by, and there are others as well. Now, what's interesting about this is that the inversion takes place in the second half of the sentence. These are restrictive expressions. So look at the second half, and I've underlined them for you to see. Not until I got home did I see the mess. Not since he left college had he had such a great time. Only after I'd seen her flat, comma, there should be a comma, did I understand. So the inversion comes after this introductory restrictive expression. Only when we'd arrived home could we get. Only by working extremely hard does one achieve success or greatness. All right, and so in these expressions, we see the second part inverted, and I think that's very interesting to note. The second part inverted. These are actually quite, well, they're not uncommon, so I might practice these, one or two of them, practice these and try to add it into your, your sort of active language. I wouldn't try to use all of them, but I would try to use one or two. I think they could be very helpful and very interesting to use as well. All right, let's take a look at the next way, and that is to replace an if conditional clause. So if I had been there is the traditional way we use an if clause. This problem wouldn't have happened. That's a conditional. But if we want to invert that, we can just we delete we delete if actually, and then we can invert the order. Had I been there. So we can say if I had been there, or had I been there, this problem wouldn't have happened. And it's the same in the next one, just so you see. If we had arrived sooner, we can drop if. Had we arrived sooner? So we have two options when we speak about conditionals in this sense. So I think it's very interesting. And I would try this. Try to drop the if and use these inversions instead. Try it because you will hear it and you will see it in writing. So it's good to try to practice it as well in active communication, either writing or speaking. Now this one is interesting, and I think shouldn't be difficult to understand. I'm not sure you all use it very much, but again, these are more intermediate, upper intermediate, perhaps pre-advanced issues. Adverbial expressions of place. So we have these prepositional phrases that are adverbial in nature. Adverbs, of course, describe verbs and adjectives. And so we have an adverbial phrase of location. On the table. Where? On the table. Where? Near the lake. And so when we can answer the question where, that means it's an expression of location or place. So on the table were the playing cards. Now, why we invert that? There's no, I think just because it probably flows a bit better. But this is how it is in English. The normal, of course, sentence is the playing cards were on the table. If we want to reverse the sentence and make it more interesting, remember sentence, I think a sentence variety, especially when you're writing, is really interesting. So if we don't want a normal sentence, you can reverse this and create a very interesting sentence. On the table were the playing cards. The playing cards were on the table. Same with sentence number 2. Example number 2. Near the lake is the best place to pitch your tent. To pitch your tent is how we collocate that. When you when you open your tent and you get it ready to sleep for the night. The best place to pitch your tent is near the lake. So we take that last prepositional, adverbial preposition, and we put it in the front at the beginning. Near the lake is the best place to pitch your tent. And you can experiment with these things with prepositional phrase or a preposition of place. So, on the moon, on the moon is the highest place to jump, perhaps, something like that. Now you can do that. You don't have to create an inversion all the time. On the moon, astronauts often eat, non-solid foods. So you don't have to do it, but it is an option to do it. And so keep that in mind. And another variation of inversions, another option for inversions, is after the so plus adjective. This is actually one I really like, this sort of construction in English. I don't know why, but I like it. So fun was the party. So tasty was the food. that we ate all of it. So when we do so plus adjective, and we have others as well, but so is I think the most common here. We have so plus adjective. We reverse the order. So fun was the party. The party was so fun. So tasty was the food. The food was very tasty. So when we add so in an adjective, we can create a very interesting sentence structure that provides variety, and it sort of engages your audience more to listen. I think it's more interesting than subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object. If you have the same sentence structure all the way through your speech or your essay, people get bored. We like variety, at least in our sentence structures. And so you want to keep that in mind. And what I'd like to do, I didn't actually offer any homework, but if you'd like to send me either a so plus adjective, and give me an example. If you want to send it directly to me, I will look at that for email as your homework. If you want to give me one example of so plus adjective and one example of the earlier one, these adverbial prepositional phrases. So out of nowhere came the boy. So if you want to try those two and send it to me as homework, I will look at it and let you know how you've done. So that's the so plus adjective plus the previous one, this adverbial expression of place. All right, let's just recap very briefly our inversions. We can use them with questions, with negative adverbs and restrictive expressions, which we looked at here, and you can look at again. I will upload this onto Instagram and to YouTube. We can do adverbs of place, adverbial expressions of place, and we can replace if clauses, conditional clauses, as well as use the so plus adjective. These are the 5 or 6 main ways we use inversions in English. Now, my question to you, and you can write me direct if you want, I'm very curious, do you use inversions? Maybe I'll put that in a question in the stories. I'm very curious. Do you use inversions in your speaking and writing? If not, I challenge you to incorporate that into your speaking and writing. So if you're involved in a group chat or an individual speaking partner, or you have someone you speak English with, try this next week to use a few inversions, either the so or one of the 5 or 6 listed here, and challenge yourself and let me know how it goes. I'm really curious.